Welcome to Progress in San Diego, Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things. I'm your host, Walter Davis, and with me this evening I have the distinct honor to welcome Congressman Bob Filner to the show. And as some of you know, he has had a very long and distinguished career in the Congress of the United States and is currently considering and running a mayoral campaign for the city of San Diego. Welcome, Congressman.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you so much for coming, sir. So tell me, what is the motivation for you to go from Congress to mayor of San Diego?
You know, I'm in politics because I want to help people. I want to help people with jobs, with education, with our environment, with health care. And I started on the school board, I went to a city council, now I'm in Congress. But Washington has become very dysfunctional. The two parties are at each other's throats. There's nothing getting done. Half the Congress does not believe that you can compromise on anything or that you discuss things in a rational basis. So nothing is getting done. I thought I could do more as the chief executive of the 8th largest city in America, whether it comes to jobs or education or environment, rather than one of 435 members of Congress. So I'm going to give up my seat at the end of my present term. And hopefully take over the mayorship of San Diego.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. And I followed your career. You know, I remember you as a freedom writer down in the South, standing up for civil rights. So I think I have a pretty good impression of where your heart is. And I've done a number of interviews. I think this is like the 4th or 5th interview that we've done together.
You know, just on that, if I can, Walter, I had the great honor because of my parents to meet Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when I was 13 years old. And I committed myself almost on the spot to nonviolent direct action. I read, of course, everything he had ever written or spoke about. He referred me to Gandhi to read. By age 15, I was organizing high schools to march with Dr. King. And by 18, I was in jail with him as one of the freedom riders. And when, after several months in the state penitentiary, and that we were put in for breaking the laws of segregation. We appealed those cases eventually to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court overturned our convictions, and in overturning those convictions, basically outlawed legal segregation in the South. And I'm thinking, I'm 18 years old, and we changed American history. And I'm saying, wow, if you get together, if you organize, you work, it was not the safest thing. You know, I had friends killed. We had to sign our last wills before we got on those buses. But we can change America, and I have an optimism about change that I've kept with me ever since the civil rights movement, that if you get involved, you can change things. I got involved when my kids were in elementary school. I was president of our PTA, and I thought that there was a decision by the school board to close my kids' schools, and we organized people all over the city whose schools were being closed. We fought the school board. We won. And then out of that, people said, why don't you run for the school board? I was a professor of history at San Diego State. I said, I have a good job. I don't need to run for the school board. But I was prevailed upon because we had figured out how to do things, that if we cared about our kids' education and all kids' education, that we had to get involved politically. So I ran for the school board. This was back in 1979. I won that election. I was chosen as president of the board a couple years later. And we really changed things in San Diego, putting resources into classroom for all kids in all communities, not just in some. We brought in, we cut bureaucracy and put money in the classroom. So that experience, starting with Dr. King and leading to the school board, give me a sense that we can really change things here in San Diego.
So you feel optimistic based upon your past, and I know that the barriers at that time were simply seemingly impossible, because I grew up in the South at that same time frame.
Where did you grow up?
Birmingham, Alabama. My church was the one that was bombed, wow. 16th Street Baptist. And so
I've been there.
We marched with Martin Luther King from Kelly Ingram Park. The reason the Klan blew my church up was because the Southern Christian Leadership Conference held meetings there every Monday night. So I've been a fighter for a very long time as well. And you're right, young people can make a big difference.
Right. You know what I enjoy most, Walter? I go to colleges and high schools, and some of them, they start off by saying, you were lucky, you lived in the 60s. And I said, no, you're lucky. I mean, one, there are so many problems. It's not that we had solved them all, obviously. We made, as Dr. King would say, we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And yet you have all of the tools to help organizing that we never had. Our iPhones have more computer power than went to the moon. So you can organize in all kinds of different ways. So I say to the high school kids, I say to college kids, get involved because you can change our nation.
Exactly. So tell me some of the things you're most proud about, your accomplishments while you were in Congress.
I had the great honor 5 years ago of being elected chairman of the Veterans Committee in the Congress. Now, I am not a veteran, and I have voted against every war that I had a chance to vote against. But if we send our kids to war, whether they were drafted as in Vietnam or even they volunteer, sometimes, it's not a real volunteer because they don't think they have other options. No matter what, if we disagree with a policy, the young men, now women, coming back should get all the care, the love, the attention, honor, and dignity that a nation can give. President Bush used to say, support our troops, support our troops, support our troops. But when they came home, they didn't do anything for them. So I became an advocate, as I always have been, sort of for the underdog, for those who have not getting proper attention. And when I was chairman of the committee, we not only put in literally tens of billions of dollars into mental health care for our veterans all over across the nation. We set up programs that I announced with President Obama and personally that we end veterans homelessness in 5 years, for example. And my proudest thing, I think, I wrote what we call the GI Bill for the 21st century. Now, there was a GI Bill passed in 1944 for the kids coming back from World War II. My dad was amongst them. He never had college education. We never lived in our own home. But the GI Bill gave free college tuition and the ability through, we bought a house, I think, for $1,000 through, very little money down to buy a house. 8 million veterans took advantage of that, and they created the middle class of our nation. And I wanted to duplicate that because benefits had gone down over the decades. And in honor of my father, we said, let's give free college education. Let's allow the veterans to buy a home again. There's 700,000 of our young people now in school because of that bill. There'll probably be a couple million before, in the next few years. So if you can do that for so many people and open up, the American dream for so many people, you got to be pretty proud of that. And I had the opportunity to do that and accomplish it.
So the Veterans Program, what else? What else can you say, you're very proud of accomplishing while you were in office?
Well, in Congress, especially in the House of Representatives, your committee assignments sort of govern where you can make the most contribution. So as chairman of the Veterans Committee, I was able to do that. I served also on the Transportation Committee, or I serve on the Transportation Committee. We put in for our projects along the border, for example, on some neighborhood transportation programs. We put in tens of millions of dollars over the years that I've been in Congress to help public transportation, to help improvements on the border. We put money into health clinics in neighborhoods that weren't used to having excellent health care. We helped job creation, youth programs to help kids get trained in, say, the construction trades. So I've had an ability to affect a whole range of things in San Diego, and I want to build on that now as mayor.
Let's get into that. So tell me about what your outlook is for job creation in San Diego.
Yeah, that's obviously, Walter, the key thing. I mean, if you have a thriving economy, other things can happen. And we've had we've been in the same recession as the rest of the country. But let me look at it historically, if I might. The prosperity of San Diego was built on the defense industry, the 50s, 60s, or 70s. Hundreds of thousands of people were employed. Skilled working people getting good wages. They could buy a house, send their kids to college. You know, General Dynamics employed 60,000 people.
Right.
The biggest private employer today in San Diego employs 4,000 or 5,000. So that's the scale. And when we lost the defense industry for a whole number of reasons in the 90s, most of it, we never replaced that broad swath of middle-class jobs for skilled working people. You can go into high tech, where you need a, PhD, or you can get a service job in our tourist industry. Not a lot in the middle. And I've looked at this problem over many years, and I said, where can we go to create those kind of jobs? And we have one of the most beautiful ports in the world. It's the biggest Navy base. It's a great tourist center. But before a few years ago, there was zero commerce. That is, ships coming in, loading, unloading. And yet, if you look at every coast city on the East Coast, West Coast, Gulf Coast in our country, the major cities have major ports. Whether you're talking about Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Atlanta, they're all great centers of commerce. We have nothing. We can create thousands of jobs here by partnering with the private sector to build the infrastructure, to bring in those jobs. A longshoreman, Walter, it's a hard job, but you know what? They start at $125,000 a year. A decade ago, we had 12 longshoremen in San Diego. LA has thousands. That's the difference. So my basic plan expands the port, then looks at other things. For example, we should become the major alternative. We should be the alternative energy capital of the world, if not the nation. That is, here we are. Sun 363 days a year.
So we should be exporting electricity.
We should be, but as the mayor and say working with the school district, we can mandate the solar power on all public buildings, say in 5 years. That creates a demand for solar panels, for photovoltaic cells, energy audits to make sure their efficiency first. Small businesses can expand, thrive, build, open. Maybe manufacture will come here because we're such a big market with that occurring. Prices will come down, so private homes and private businesses will be able to put on solar power. I could sign an order mandating that for public buildings, and we create an enormous growth in our economy.
So you see possibilities to create synergy by taking some very simple actions.
No question. I mean, they come out to be big things, but it's almost common sense. Why aren't we using our port? Why aren't we becoming an alternative energy capital? Here we have the most sun in the country. We should have the most solar power in the country. We have a border with Mexico, by the way, that people cross legally every day. Hundreds of thousands of people shop, spend money. And yet, because the border is so inefficient to cross legally, we lose $6 billion a year right off the top into our economy. If we just staffed that more efficiently, put some technology at the border, $6 billion to our economy. This is stuff that we should be doing. And it changes, not overnight, but it changes fairly rapidly the economic situation in San Diego. People get more excited, they have more hope, they have more enthusiasm, and then it affects everything. It affects education, it affects the culture and arts, it affects the environment, because people are feeling very good about the place where they live if they feel secure about the economic future.
I don't want to leave the job topic, because I know how important that is. I do want to talk about education and other environmental concerns. Are there any other important features to your jobs program?
Well, we want to obviously help small business. There used to be a small business office in the office of the mayor. It hardly exists now. We should be giving small business technical guidance, the ability to create business plans, access to capital. We should reestablish that. We have such innovative businesses around. The mayor should be honoring those. I went to a little meeting of small business people who were trying new innovations, and one guy had a whole new kind of grass, artificial grass, that was very environmentally sound, very little water. It's like a sort of advanced AstroTurf. And I was thinking, why doesn't the city say, small business has a problem just getting started, getting that first contract, getting, you know, some capital. And I'm saying, why doesn't the city say, take this guy, give him a small contract, say for several of our rec centers or parks, to turf. It would help him started. It would help our city. It would highlight, you know, our local innovation. But we could be doing things, and the mayor very personally could be bringing excitement to that whole thing. Let me segue for you, by the way, into education. Obviously, job training, getting those skills in our community colleges is very important. Making sure the kids in the K-12 sector sense that their education leads to real employment, and we can, I think, make those connections as a city that we're simply not making today.
So education is going to be a focus, job creation. Tell me more about the education.
You know, I happen to, as I said, been an educator. I came to San Diego 42 years ago to teach history at San Diego State, and I taught there for 22 years. I thought, by the way, that since I had so many thousands of students, I would be able to win the mayorship just on that. But every time I knocked on a door and met a student, he said, "You gave me a D. I'm not going to vote for you." I was a tough grader, and but the students remember the courses. I was elected to school board, president of school board. I'm the only mayoral candidate whose kids went to the public school system here in San Diego. So I think I know a little bit about our educational system. And what I would like to do as mayor is not, as some of the candidates have suggested, take over the school system. We got enough problems running the city. I don't know why we would want to run the school system. But we can help the school system. Just as an example, we give our kids to the schools 9 to 3, say. What happens before school, after school? When the kids get in most trouble, parents may be working, the kids are on their own. I think the city should take care of its children. The whole city. Why don't we all have a responsibility? We have these incredible world-class museums in Balboa Park. Why aren't they open from after school till 6 o'clock, for example, for our students to learn? Supervised, of course. To learn, to see how an exhibit is set up, to learn how the business part of it runs. Imagine the learning opportunities, and they're kept busy, right, when they could get most in trouble. Imagine what the Padres or the Chargers can do in terms of role models and showing the kids, say, the business side of the thing, or how the field is prepared. Our Navy, Qualcomm, big businesses, small businesses, the Navy, churches, all of these could have the kids involved after school. It doesn't take any money. It's a commitment of our city. And a mayor can build that commitment, that excitement, that sense that we're all involved. That has to help the police department. It has to help, you know, the judicial system, you know, the justice system and all that. And the kids get more excited about school. They have higher achievement. We bring down some of the social problems involved with gangs and crime. Let's do it. I mean, there's nothing that stops us from doing this.
So I'm hearing a lot of synergy in what you're talking about, because obviously we have a tax problem, which is why our libraries are closing, and this is why the fire departments had to shut down on certain days. Part of that has to do because of loss of jobs, as you talked about before, not being adaptable, not using our port in a way that's more effective to create jobs, not focusing on tourism, not utilizing the natural resources that we have available in the community, such as solar power, even desalination of water and other things that are possible to create jobs and make us much more energy self-sufficient. So San Diego has failed to keep its tax base. Tell me about what your policies would be with regard to managing the tax structure.
Right. But, you know, as you said, the expansion of the economy is the sine qua non of that. That is, you got to do that. That raises tax revenues, right? That has people investing. That creates jobs. It does all the things that you have to do to raise your revenues and decrease your expenses, because you have less social problems if you have an expanding economy. But there's so many areas, you know, that we could use. I happen to know the father of your guy on camera 3, who's an incredible muralist. He did some of the murals in Chicano Park. We have talent. I don't care if you're talking about Chicano Park. I don't care if you're talking about the African-American history in downtown, or our Filipino population. We have tremendous artistic and business talent in those communities. We're not using them to not only bring up communities that have been poor, but to bring in tourism, for example. Can you imagine if we used the talents of all these communities to help tourism? It would be incredible. We're not using our environmental assets to help tourism. I'll just give you one little example, Walter. We have 4 wonderful river systems in San Diego. San Diego River, Chollas Creek, and Otay Valley River Park. Mm-hmm. And there are little community groups around each one that have purchased property, that have built trails. They are marvelous facilities. I will bet that 98% of our population doesn't know about any of them. There's no signage. There's no sense. You can go 2 minutes off our urban environment and be on primitive trails in those parks. They're wonderful. But they're wonderful for our citizens, and they're wonderful for tourism. And yet we don't market it, we don't advertise it, we don't have events there, people don't know they're there. I entered Otay Valley Park the other day off a little neighborhood street. There's not even a sign that says this is a wonderful park. A mayor can build that excitement and encourage what's going on. And when you think of the environment, we have our beaches, obviously, which attract tourists, but we have so many other things. Mm-hmm. And so if you start thinking about environment, art, our binational culture that's centered on the border, there are so many things that would have not only raise our quality of life as human beings, but bring in tourism, bring in economic activity, spur small business growth. We can do it all. This is San Diego. One of my childhood heroes and mentors, aside from Dr. King, was Bobby Kennedy. And he used to quote George Bernard Shaw in his speeches in the following way. He would say, most people see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Why not have a city which is growing its jobs? Why not have a city where the environment and our artistic treasures can bring in tourism? Why not confront homelessness and solve that? We can do that here. Why not make sure our educational system educates everyone? Mm-hmm. This is, I'm looking at the future with great optimism that we can do this. Why not, as Bobby Kennedy would say? So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Outstanding. This went by so fast. We're down to our last 5 minutes of this interview, and I'm hoping that you'll do another one with me so that we can talk about some other things like transportation, further information about the environment, and more about jobs and more about education, homelessness, and what your particular outlooks are on what can be different in those areas. Within this interview, however, we're at our last 5 minutes. I want to make sure that you are able to convey to the public at this time the most important messages that you want to put out. We've gone through some real rough times in San Diego, and the pension mess is just sort of the biggest example of that, where through the fault of the greed of Wall Street, and then some mayors trying to steal from the pension fund, we're in a mess that was not created by the employees, and yet they're being blamed for it. I believe we can solve that without throwing the employees under the bus, and actually come out with a reformed pension system, but which rewards and honors our public employees. I believe that we can create jobs without waiting for the federal government. The port is just waiting there to be utilized. The sun is just waiting there to be utilized. I mean, we can do this. I mentioned homeless briefly. As I said to an earlier question, I wrote the laws that are going to bring our veterans homeless down to 0 in 5 years, we hope. The veterans are almost half of the homeless population. If federal programs can reduce our homeless to half in San Diego, we're left with a few thousand people that we should not be afraid to look these people in the eye and say, this is our problem too. We're the richest country in the history of the world.
It is not only immoral to have homeless, it's criminal. And I think we have to say, you know, it's our own humanity, it's our own sense of who we are as human beings, to get people off the streets, get them some shelter out of the violence and the uncertainty of the street. They will deal with issues like violence, substance abuse and mental illness, and then job, you know, at their own pace. Let's get them off the street. There have been buildings made available, for example, old hospitals or motels that can house 300-400 people in private rooms. It's a minimal, really, cost to the city to take over those structures, and get these people give them some shelter and some roof over their heads, so that they can, in fact, begin to heal and become productive members of our society. Again, quoting Bobby Kennedy, why not? As a city, we can do this, and we should.
Well, that's just really outstanding. It's really been a pleasure to have you for this segment of this show, and I'm very encouraged to see that you're running and to talk about. One of the things I like about you is that you're always able to kind of talk from the hip and just really be honest and down to earth on things. You don't say the politically correct things. You actually have solutions for problems and things that make sense.
Well, thank you.
And so with that, I want to thank our studio audience for joining us for this segment of Progress in San Diego. Please make sure you tell your family and friends that we're coming on Sundays at 5 p.m. on Cox Communications. You can also find us online, and going to the website that's going to be provided at the end of the broadcast, you'll be able to get further information about the guests that you see on this television broadcast. Thank you very much, Congressman, for joining us. I really appreciate you. And I appreciate you as well. Please come back and visit us every week. We're at same place, same time. And again, you can see the archive versions of our show for the many years that we've been aboard here at Cox Communications. My name is Walter Davis, and thank you very much.